So remember what we talked about routing, right? Everything is going from the snake to the stage box, then here, right? It's the same thing here from here to here. It's being connected by a USB now, right? So right here, USB straight to the computer, and then the computer is interpreting all of the signal, right? Same thing as we would do here, which is to find what is the input channel coming from the back. This input section here is asking you the same thing. Does that make sense? Like it's asking you from all the channels you have from the board, which one do you want to assign to this strip? Just like we're assigning A1 to number 1 as kick, is the same thing that it's asking here, right? And an easy way to find that is also to go to routing, right? For it to go to routing here, I believe it should be, Lord, please remind me, USB audio. You can see we have 48 channels that we can simultaneously send to this. Does that make sense? So now we can say that A1 is what? Exactly. So we can see that we have kick mute and we have kick record because we're using it for different things. But we're recording 1 and 2 as kicks, and we label them here, right?
Yeah.
Now let me ask,
3 and 4.
can you tell me what number 6 would be?
Tom.
Tom. Does that make sense? We can see input right here as what? 6. So we click on that, and then now this place is assigned to only record number 6.
Sorry for
Go ahead.
breaking up. Over there, there's just one. All the times are routed through one bus, right?
Buses don't affect this at all.
So I was about to ask, like, this has 3, all 3
Yeah,
of them. Oh,
yeah.
okay.
But like this you can make its own bus here. You can make its own DCA here. All that kind of stuff. Exactly. That's the flexibility of having a DAW. Does that make
This
sense?
doesn't affect-
Exactly. And if you were to ever adjust anything here, at least on this place, you can always undo it. Like it does not affect the raw audio itself. Does that make sense? So that's why, like, let's say during like praise and worship, somebody forgot to pan the Lockwood, the lead singer, back to the center. Like when we're mixing after, we can always just, fix that. You know what I mean? Like it's not like, oh, now she's in our left ear for the rest of our lives. You know what I mean? So
That's what you were telling me for live recording. You're
exactly,
like, you don't have to worry about, like, adjusting the audio and
exactly,
everything
because we can always post-production basically, right? And so now that we've figured out inputs, now a lot of the things that you're seeing after that is basically the effects that we're using here, right? You can use a different kind of way to also edit it. Does that make sense? So let me give you an example. This is the same EQ that you see here. Does that make sense? Right? Now, of course, they would look differently because some of these things are emulating very old gear, if that makes sense. Because there's just something about old gear that just, I guess, sounds sweet, and the ear is very used to it already. You can see, let's see, for example, this is a compressor. You can see, doesn't it look familiar to the ones we use on our vocals? They're not the same, but exactly, it has the same thing. It has an attack, has an output, it has a release, it has a ratio. It has all of the things that a compressor has. They just look differently and they just function slightly differently, right? Let's see, another thing, you can see that we also have some reverb here in the extra section, right here. We have delay, we have reverb, right? Of course, this is just a different kind of reverb that is not native here, any of that kind of stuff. But oftentimes when someone is mixing for like broadcast, we have, I don't say similar priorities, but different priorities at the same time, right? When we say just the crowd here, I don't expect you to turn up crowd here. In fact, crowd does not go out into the speaker. Does that make sense? Because we are here. You know what I mean? So just the congregation, it makes no sense, you know what I mean? But someone online that is not in the house might want to hear the congregation actually sing. You know what I mean? And so we'll just say, man, the crowd is really carrying this. Maybe we should turn them up at this time. You know what I mean? And once we go back to regular singing, we tuck them back in, right? It's the same thing. The preacher has come up. We can't really hear him. Or he said something really funny. Cue laughter. This congregation is dry. Or we have moving cam actually seeing someone laugh, but we can't hear them laugh. You know what I mean? Like,
I like how you're using like actual programs.
Exactly. Like you're mixing for what we can see. We also want to hear. Does that make sense? And so, of course, like we have some rules here that are generally like the same. Of course, you don't really need to turn up or turn down drums here because like we already have, well, I say a lot of compressors and limiters that make a lot of space already for vocals. For the most part, what you're doing here is you're adjusting lead vocals, reverb, and crowd. Like those are probably like the three most important things that you need to be doing like for a mix, if that makes sense, for it to feel more in-house or feel more natural. I'll say this, by God's grace, maybe we'll move away from this place by God's grace. Like, of course, you can't make the most informed decision about a mix here because you're also in the house. And the house sound is affecting what you're hearing. So you can't accurately say what is someone hearing in an isolated, totally different place. That's why a lot of churches will have a separate broadcast place that is not in the house. Because then when you're mixing, you're actually mixing for what you actually want to hear separate from the congregation, right? So I would say this, whenever I hear our online mix, one of the things I feel like we lack is a little more keys and congregation. Like, we have an active church. We need to play to it, right? If that makes sense. Like, so like, Yeshua Mashiach, when we say just the drums, that also means that we want to hear the congregation. You know what I mean? And so it's like simple things like that. We're asking ourselves like, who is listening to this and what do they need to hear? That makes sense. But any questions, concerns, or remarks about?
So you said for the most part, on this, we're just adjusting whoever's leading, the crowd,
Yeah.
and the reverb.
Yes, those are like the major things. Let's say like,
What about instruments in terms of like more drums?
yes. So for example, let's say there is a portion where it's like, oh, it's an instrumental. It would make sense if you saw like a saxist, like doing a solo or something like that for you to actually turn it up. Does that make sense? And obviously tuck it back into the mix like once it's done. Because once again, remember you're riding the fader and you're saying what best serves this moment. Anu is not singing, the vocalists don't have their mics in their mouths. Someone else is taking up that frequency range. Is it the guitar doing a solo? Is it the sax doing a solo? Is it the drums doing a solo? We turn it up and then we tuck it back in after. So, yeah.
For this one, is it already like preset, like the EQ?
Yes.
Okay.
A lot of the stuff is already preset. Technically, this is a Bethel template, right? Yes, this is a Bethel template. So a lot of the stuff that they actually even do post-production wise is still through this template. It's very intuitive. It honestly, it's a great template.
Good. Our mix is really
Compared to other churches. You look like
someone's
saints.
trying to steal it from me. Yeah, they was like,
Isn't it like 1K or something? Like, and I think that just speaks to, there are a lot of problems in churches that I think what this house gives you as a gift is the ability to solve them and become a solution to another church. Does that make sense? Like, I remember there's a guy that makes drum cages now. PD and I were talking about it. And the guy started in a church as a carpenter, and I think he was a drummer, and he had a small space. And it was like, these janky things always fall apart. We just need to make something that is really like, you can see through. Does that make sense? Like, it's compact, it has AC because we be sweating, all that kind of stuff. And now he has a company that sells drum cages to church for at least 4K. That's the entrance. Does that make sense? Right? You see a problem in your church, you become the solution, you can sell it to other churches. Does that make sense? So it's a lot of these things, man, like I guess it's a problem, but it's also a gift as a problem, if that makes sense. Like, you should be asking yourself, like, what can we do to make this, you know what I mean, better? And honestly, a lot of churches are just looking for people who can just stand on their feet and just say, let me solve this problem for you. You know what I mean? And of course, by God's grace, they'll throw money at you, bro. They will. So, yeah.